Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. This is the weekly podcast for all your tillage news and advice. In this episode, I'll be discussing spring malting barley with Eoin Lyons, the Teagasc Boortmalt Joint Program advisor. I first asked Eoin how spring barley is progressing during the drought.
The catch and baby in the southeast of the country, I suppose there's large variances between crops when you take the Wexford type crops versus further up the country when we move into Carlow and Laois, Kildare and further into the northeast. And I suppose, look, for the most part, the Wexford crops are generally looking good. They have strong tillers on most of the crops and good plant stand as well. But we saw over the past maybe 5 days to a week that moisture that was in around the root zone has disappeared from the crops. So there are small stresses coming through on these crops, but for the most part, they are looking very good as of today. Now, look, as we move forward, further up the country, as I said, into Carlow and Laois, Kildare, there is a deterioration in the quality of the crops. So, look, a lot of these crops, they've been under stress for the past 3 to 4 weeks now from lack of moisture. And I suppose, look, although there was a good plant stand there and the tillers were coming nicely on these crops, over that spell of the past 3 to 4 weeks with the stress that they were under, these tillers have dropped off, and really you can't see them contributing much to yield at this stage.
So the crops they're after thinning out a good bit. Eoin, are you seeing, I suppose myself I'm seeing as I'm walking through some of those crops, a lot of ground, I suppose, as you're actually walking through the crops, and maybe worryingly enough, they are starting to head out maybe a little bit as well.
Yeah, they're pushing straight on to the awns emerging, and really it's them tillers that had the potential to be there to be nice thick crops, but really that potential has been lost a bit by the lack of moisture.
Oh, and you've had a number of weather monitoring stations across the region. What sort of differences have you seen in rainfall since the barleys have been sown?
Yeah, look, I suppose the data from the rainfall from the weather stations on our monitor farms, it further kind of strengthens the north-south divide when it comes to the progression of crops. So look, just to give you an idea of the rainfall, I suppose I picked the date of March 20th to May 31st, and that's kind of roughly the sown period for a lot of spring crops. So firstly, just to look at two of our Wexford weather stations, our first one located in Ferns in North Wexford. In that period, it had rainfall of 53.6 mil, and another station in New Ross had 71.2. So look, when we compare that, I suppose, to the Met Éireann 30-year average for that particular area, that's coming in at 146.3 mil for the same time period. So we are significantly back on what our average rainfall for that period would be. But I suppose the picture is further worsened when we look at our stations in Carlow and Stradbally. So look, in Carlow, which the farm is just located outside the town, the total rainfall for that period was 36.3 mil, and our Stradbally farm then was 44.2. And they're compared to that 30-year average of 130.2 mil. So a long way off what our average rainfall would be. Now look, I suppose while the rainfall in Wexford, it has been well below our average, but the rainfall that has fallen in that period has come at a very good time for crop development. And really that's what's leading on to the crops down there looking so well. And then compare and contrast that then to the crops further up. We'll see that rain that fell in Carlow and Stradbally, I suppose, didn't come at as much of a beneficial timing as the Wexford rainfall came at. And that has led on to the crops that we have today that are thin and probably hasn't developed the way we'd like.
Okay, yeah, so it's certainly a contrasting picture there. And how do you think that's going to develop into yield potential on the various crops now?
Yeah, I suppose for the good crops, I would still think that the potential is there for an average to good yield to come through. As I said, we have the plants, we have the tillers, and really the potential remains there. Unfortunately for them poorer crops, further up north we go, that continued stress of lack of moisture has inevitably meant that tillers have been lost. So it will have an impact on yield when it comes to harvest time. But look, I suppose while rain and moisture will still be beneficial to these spring crops, to both good and bad, I suppose it is required as soon as possible, because as we kind of know, once the barley shoots out and the head comes out, really the yield has been set at that stage, and rainfall at that stage is too late. And we've seen over the past few days that some of them early crops, the head is, or the awns are starting to come out. So they are, it is going to be, it is early for that to be happening. And once the head is out, I'm afraid I don't think moisture is going to have a big impact on yield.
So for the good crops, good and all as they are, they still have a way to go in terms of filling out, if you like, and they need moisture to do that. And for the, what if we get, say, a lot of rain, maybe, say we get maybe a week's rain over the next week? There's no chance of those relatively poorish looking crops coming back now?
I think because of this extended period of stress on them poor crops, some of them tillers really have given up, and they won't come to much. But the fear that we would have, and I suppose more so from a malt and barley point of view, is that some of them weaker tillers might just come on, but they're still going to be behind the main shoots, or the main tillers that are there. And it could cause more harm than good from point of view of green grains in the tank, which could have issues with protein levels from a malt and barley point of view.
Okay, so how would you see is straw yield going to reflect grain yield in the sense of that there might be an awful lot less straw out there to be sold this year?
I think it will. It's noticeable how short crops are, spring barley crops are. Even the good crops, while although the tillers are there, they are visibly short. And really, as I said, in a similar way to yield being set when the awn comes out, really when the awns are out and the head comes out, the amount of growing, how much taller that crop is going to get, will be limited. So look, I think we are looking at for some crops a reduced yield, grain yield, and I suppose for majority crops we will be probably looking at reduced straw yield also.
Okay, so I presume then, seeing as we have all this dry weather, disease levels must be very low out there. What scope does that give a grower to adjust the final fungicide application?
Yeah, and I suppose that's a question that many growers are asking at the moment, and are rightly so to be asking that question, because as you said, disease levels and disease pressure on spring barley is extremely low, and that temptation is there to cut back on your fungicide spend in order to try and save money on the crop. But I suppose, look, the way I would look at that is that your T2 fungicide application on barley, it needs to protect that plant for probably the next 3 to 4 weeks to prevent disease coming in. And really, in that time period, although our weather is settled at the moment, it could change in that time, and that could progress on to higher disease pressure. And really, if we don't have that plant protected well enough, the disease could come in, and we could have a hit on yield as a result of that. So look, the advice I would give to growers with spring barley in relation to T2 fungicide would be to look at the crop that you have in the ground and to try and tailor your fungicide spend in relation to the crop you had. So look, the example of that would, like, if a crop looks as it should, you have a nice number of tillers and plants there, the reality is you'll probably have your target number of heads come harvest time to give you your desired yield. And really, applying the normal type of T2 to that crop is probably best practice to try and push to get the most potential as possibly can out of that crop. And I suppose as we come down then and we look at the crops that maybe are not going to perform very well and the potential is not in the crop, to reduce our fungicide spend on them crops to reflect how the crop is looking. And really, the chances are that them thin crops, the disease pressure will more likely be lower in them crops anyway, because they are that much thinner.
And you were saying a typical fungicide for the better looking crops. What sort of products are you looking at for that typical application, if you like?
Yeah, so the type of products you're looking at is sort of your products such as your Cerex, your Latticera, Siltra, Helix, Intrex, all these type of products will be sufficient for your T2. And really, the rate of these products, a half rate is optimum, and it has been shown in the trials in Oak Park to give sufficient control of disease at that T2 timing. And I suppose just to mention timing in itself, that sort of period when the awns are coming out and it kind of at the paper stage is the most ideal timing to get your T2 applied. And the trials have shown that it gives about 0.3 of a tonne a hectare increase in yield by applying at that timing versus waiting until the head is fully out on the barley.
Okay, I suppose I'm wondering. I'm not sure we have the results to back it up, but I wonder, does that make a lot of difference this year, given the year that's in it? Certainly, best practice, perhaps, I suppose, for crops further south, that have the better yield potential. But can I also then ask? Obviously, we can't. Maybe some growers only come up against this. We can't use Bravo or chlorothalonil anymore. This year, it became delisted, I suppose, since the late May. The alternatives out there, what should guys be using?
I suppose, look, for spring barley growers this year, Folpit is probably the most best alternative for Bravo or chlorothalonil for ramularia control, and really applying that at litre per hectare along with your other products, your Cerex or Latticera, etc., will be best control for that ramularia control. But again, it's that timing, just to get the timing correct, to get that flag leaf coated with the Folpit and prevent the ramularia from coming in to the crop.
Okay. Plenty of talk and chatter amongst the trade and perhaps farmers there about adding other bits and pieces into the tank, the likes of trace elements, maybe magnesium and biostimulants and nitrogen and various other different things. What's your view on those additions?
Yeah, look, I suppose to look at the role or the potential role of them nutrients or biostimulants for the crop, I suppose is to try and prolong that green leaf area, or to rectify nutrient problems within the crop. And I suppose in doing so, it allows the plant to photosynthesize more and increase the potential yield of the crop. But I suppose with these micronutrients and biostimulants that can be used on crops, there is limited scientific data that they will contribute to final yield. So the advice that I would have, that if you are deciding that micronutrient or a biostimulant is for you to apply at T2, is to try and keep that cost per hectare low. You don't want to spend too much on these products, because there might not be a significant yield when the combine goes through the field. So just to keep an eye on price per hectare when it comes to applying.
Okay. Probably always good advice to ensure there's good scientific backup for any of these products that you're putting into the tank. Look for that first, and then you look for the price. So Eoin, you have a good few monitor farm sites out there, and you have demonstrations or trials, I suppose, on some of those farms. What have you got out there, and is it yielding any information to you this year?
Yeah, look, I suppose as part of that monitor farm program, the trials are put in place to see, can we improve the way in which we grow both spring and winter malt and barley. And I suppose just to give a flavour of the type of trials we have this year, look, we have a lime trial on sort of a lime deficient site, just to see crop development versus a low pH versus a correct pH. We also have the use of growth regulators, so like your cycles and K2 to try and promote tillering of spring barley. We also have then trying to assess protein levels and yield using different nitrogen rates post the catch crop. So we're trying to see what level of nitrogen the catch crop is bringing to the following crop. And then we also have a bit then on winter malt, on craft, just a few seed and red trials to see can we promote yield in the winter malt. And I suppose, look, there is plenty of data to see from the trials that we're doing, or the farm demos. But I suppose it is good to note that while spring barley crops aren't performing like you would like to have them due to lack of moisture, it is having an effect on these trials as well, that we're not seeing as much as we'd like. But there is differences still to be seen. Look, and I suppose of a normal year, we'd have plenty of farm walks on these farms, and we'd be able to go in and see the trials. But obviously this year that can't happen. But there will be a series of videos on our farm demos or our trials that will be out post-harvest, and we'll see all the results in them videos.
Okay, it's good to follow any of those kind of demos all the way through to harvest. It's I suppose it's grand to see the potential greening differences maybe at certain points in the year, but to actually measure it towards harvest, I think is the right way to go. I just want to ask you a final question, Eoin, and that's kind of about kind of growers wrapping up for the season, if you like, and with grass weeds in mind. I suppose wild oats is certainly one that people would be very familiar with, but you also have some of the more tricky ones coming in now, with the likes of canary grass and even blackgrass. What sort of advice, or is it still applicable for spring barley, malt and barley growers to control them at this stage?
Yeah, I suppose as these harmful grasses kind of develop, we can see them above the crop, I suppose, and really, if you're a grower, to ID or identify where the problem is in the field, and to try and make sort of a weed map of where these harmful grasses are, so that we know coming back next year that we can treat maybe that the section where it's bad in a different way, or we can try and do stubble cultivation for different grass weeds post harvest to try and help control. But I suppose before harvest, before we get that far, if hand roguing is an option for these grasses, or wild oats, or maybe canary grass, or different things that might be especially applicable to spring barley, roguing is very important to prevent that seed return before harvest.
Okay, Eoin, thank you very much for your time, and look, we'll be back to you again perhaps before the harvest is out. That's it for the Tillage Edge this week, and my thanks to Eoin for joining me on the podcast. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss an episode, and for more farming news, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.